Afghanistan 2006. In the middle of a raging firefight, the most elite troops in the Australian military made a choice that could have destroyed their careers. They walked away from their American allies not out of fear, not because they lost their nerve, but because remaining beside them meant certain death. What you are about to hear has remained hidden inside classified after action files for almost 20 years. A story so explosive and controversial that both governments preferred it erased from official history, because this is not only about battlefield tactics, it is about a fracture so severe inside the coalition that it nearly cost lives on both sides. The Australian SAS shadows trained to vanish and observe the enemy for weeks without detection faced the American war machine, massive firepower helicopters, gunships, radios alive on every channel, two opposing philosophies of combat, two allied forces, one Afghan valley where everything unraveled. Why did an Australian commander violate protocol and divide his patrol deep inside hostile territory? What did intercepted Taliban communications reveal about how easily coalition forces could be tracked, and what hidden truth would surface 2 decades later that reshaped everything believed about Australia's most decorated unit? This is the untold story of a war within the war. The moment the quiet professionals looked at their loudest partners and quietly decided not to stay, what began as a tactical disagreement ended in one of the biggest military scandals of the 21st century. And the ending is not what you expect. July 2006. Brutal heat hammered the jagged rocks of the Kora Valley in Uruzgan Province, Afghanistan. An Australian Special Air Service patrol lay perfectly still in the dust camouflage, merging with the terrain, observing through powerful optics as their American allies advanced noisily along the ridge above. The contrast was painful. The Australians had moved like phantoms for days, silent and unseen, while the incoming American unit announced itself with thunderous footsteps. Heavy boots striking stone echoed for kilometers through the thin mountain air. Radios crackled continuously, broadcasting their presence to anyone with a basic receiver. Every instinct of the Australian commander signaled danger. He knew Taliban observers were watching, listening, preparing an ambush with deadly precision. The mission had been planned as a joint operation symbolizing coalition unity, but on the ground, it felt like a catastrophe waiting to happen. He made a decision that would shock military leadership, speaking quietly into his radio with absolute certainty that they were pulling out because staying would get everyone killed. This was only the first fracture in a partnership that threatened to tear the entire war effort apart. If you want the raw history of special operations, rarely shown publicly, subscribe. Now today, we are diving into the classified reality of modern warfare and exposing secrets buried for decades. The Australian Special Air Service Regiment had fought alongside American troops since Vietnam, forging bonds in blood and fire. Formed in 1957 and modeled after Britain's legendary SAS, Regiment built its reputation on patient silence and deep reconnaissance behind enemy lines. Their motto, "Who dares wins," was not a slogan, but a lived reality earned through hardship and sacrifice. They became masters of invisibility, soldiers who could disappear into jungle or desert and strike without warning. Their roots stretched back to the Malayan emergency, where they learned that even a snapped twig could mean death. In Borneo, during the confrontation with Indonesia in 1965, they refined ambush tactics and silent killing techniques. Their first fatality there came not from enemy fire, but from the environment itself, when a soldier was crushed by an elephant in the darkness of the rainforest. Experiences that cemented a deep respect for terrain and stealth that shaped their doctrine for decades. In Vietnam, they earned a fearsome reputation. While American forces relied on overwhelming firepower and helicopter assaults, Australian patrols operated silently in Phuoc Thu Province, so effective that Viet Cong fighters feared them more than conventional infantry units. They became known as jungle phantoms. striking suddenly and vanishing before retaliation was possible. This legacy of total stealth became sacred doctrine past. From veteran to newcomer, selection for the regiment is among the harshest in the world. A 21-day ordeal pushing candidates beyond physical and mental limits, navigating vast distances alone through the Australian outback, carrying heavy loads with minimal supplies, deprived of sleep and comfort, scrutinized relentlessly for weakness, marched until feet bleed and hallucinations begin, tested on decision-making while exhausted, navigation without technology discipline, under isolation with failure, rates above 90%, ensuring only the elite earn the Sandy Beret. These soldiers are survival experts, capable of operating alone for weeks, trained to rely on intellect before weapons, and endure conditions that would break most people within hours. When Operation Slipper began in 2001, after the September 11th attacks, Australia quickly deployed SAS squadrons alongside U.S. Special Operations Command across Afghanistan under the International Security Assistance Force. Planners assumed seamless cooperation between highly trained English-speaking allies fighting the same enemy. On paper, they appeared interchangeable. In reality, a hidden barrier emerged on the battlefield. The first major loss came on February 16, 2002, when Sergeant Andrew Russell died after his vehicle struck a landmine, a sobering reminder that this was not peacekeeping, but brutal war. As operations continued, a different threat surfaced, not from the enemy, but from conflicting doctrines. Australian patrols operated on 72-hour insertion cycles with total radio silence and no visible movement in daylight, blending into the environment to gather intelligence unseen. Americans emphasized speed, firepower, and constant communication with air support, assuming dominance through force. In practice, the difference was stark. Australians could remain undetected within 200 meters of enemy positions for days, carefully managing noise waste and heat signatures. American units often moved in large groups, with engines roaring and radios active, detectable from kilometers away to Australians. This approach in a guerrilla war seemed dangerously exposed. Tension surfaced during planning meetings at Kandahar airfield in late 2001. Australians expected tightly controlled briefings. Instead, they encountered open rooms, buzzing with activity and communications, a culture shock that challenged their concept of operational security. An SAS sergeant later recalled spending weeks preparing for a single insertion, studying terrain, village routines, even daily habits of locals, only to hear American plans to insert by helicopter at dawn with gunship support. Ready, a clash between surgical precision and overwhelming force. Training differences ran deep. Australians emphasized navigation without GPS, survival on minimal rations, and the ability to remain motionless for 18 hours, controlling breathing and heart rate despite pain. American training focused on rapid assaults, air coordination, hostage rescue, and aggressive action backed by vast resources. Equipment reflected this divide. Australians carried suppressed weapons, minimal electronics, and noise-dampened gear. Americans carried multiple radios, infrared markers, standard rifles, extra ammunition, prioritizing communication and firepower over stealth. How do you conduct a covert war when your allies operate in ways that expose you? This question haunted Australian commanders. The conflict intensified during Operation Anaconda in March 2002. In the Shahi Valley of Paksha province, where intelligence estimated hundreds of entrenched al-Qaeda and Taliban fighters, Australians proposed slow infiltration on foot at night, establishing hidden observation posts and gathering intelligence. For weeks before attacking, Americans planned immediate helicopter insertion supported by heavy firepower. Australians warned noisy aircraft would alert every enemy fighter before landing. They requested separate operational zones, effectively admitting the two approaches could not safely coexist. By 2005, tensions escalated in Uruzgan province, heartland of the insurgency, where joint patrols struggled to reconcile stealth with force. In 2006, a combined mission targeted a high-value Taliban commander. Near Tarin Kowt, Australian elements moved silently, using hand signals and carefully secured equipment. American forces behind them produced audible noise detectable hundreds of meters away. An SAS operator later wrote that American boots sounded like drums on stone to soldiers who treated silence as survival. This meant exposure faced with possible ambush. The Australian commander made a controversial decision, splitting from the joint patrol without permission and continuing independently. Americans were redirected via liaison to another route. Coalition leadership was furious during debriefings. Australians responded bluntly that American movement techniques compromised operational security for reconnaissance teams, intercepted Taliban. Communications later confirmed enemy observers could detect American patrols by sound-alone. Fighters even learned to distinguish weapons by mechanical noises, referring fearfully to silent units, likely Australian or British special forces encountered. Far less often, differences extended to how success was measured. American reports emphasized enemies killed weapons, destroyed rounds fired. Australians documented intelligence, gathered time spent undetected. Leadership networks mapped success defined by knowledge rather than destruction. By 2008, coalition command adopted a practical solution: separation rather than forced integration. Australian units conducted long reconnaissance missions while American forces executed raids based on that intelligence. Australians became the scalpel, Americans the hammer. Between 2005 and 2013, Australian patrols achieved remarkable results, remaining undetected within 500 meters of enemy positions for weeks and providing intelligence leading to numerous high-value target eliminations. Senior commanders praised their capabilities in hostile terrain. Reviews concluded the two doctrines were fundamentally incompatible in the same space, recommending coordinated but separate missions. By the time Australia withdrew combat forces in 2013, the model was established: deep reconnaissance feeding intelligence to American direct action units using different insertion methods, areas, and tactics, but shared strategic goals. One U.S. Special Forces colonel summarized it simply: Australians see what we cannot, we destroy what they find. It works because we stopped trying to do it the same way. Yet operating separately carried risks. In 2010, an SAS patrol deep in Kandahar province was surrounded and outgunned beyond range of friendly support there. Survival depended on an American quick reaction force that fought through intense resistance to extract them, a moment that forced both nations to reconsider the dangers of fighting alone. Years later, a darker chapter emerged. In 2020, the Burraton report revealed credible evidence that some SAS members had unlawfully killed Afghan civilians and prisoners, alleging a toxic warrior culture where junior soldiers were pressured to execute detainees, a revelation that cast a shadow over the regiment's legacy and raised troubling questions about the psychological cost of elite warfare. That story is for another time. If you want more real documented special operations history, subscribe and comment which unit's doctrine and combat history should be examined next. See you in the next video. Until then, stay tactical.